John Sweeney is a writer and a broadcaster, an investigative journalist, and has tonight labelled the story that exposes Professor Ferguson's actions as a witch burning. Welcome to the programme, John.
Hi, Tom.
What do you mean by witch burning?
Well, Tom, you've forgotten a simple statistic that appeared this evening, which is that Britain now has the highest number of deaths in Europe, bar none. And so, I mean, you didn't mention any of that in your intro. And
no, but I'm not talking about that, John. That was in our news bulletin.
No, hold on a second, Tom. Here's the context. Britain now has the highest number of deaths in Europe, and it's weird, is it not, that this story about the professor's sex life pops up today, isn't it? I mean, have you been a journalist for long? Do you get the context here? Is it possible that this is a dirty tricks operation by this government? People like Dominic Cummings, he played the game so nastily, the Chancellor of the Exchequer had to resign and give way to somebody else because he didn't like his game. But anyway, so
let's stick to what we know rather than what we think.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. We do know that Britain today has the highest number of COVID deaths in Europe. That's correct, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
We know that.
Absolutely. It's terrible.
Good. Okay, good. So I think it's worth bearing that in mind when this story breaks.
Those two facts can exist alongside one another. It is absolutely the case, as you're right, as we will come on to later in the programme. Britain has this horrendous statistic and the lives that have been lost by it. Okay, but I don't understand that you're saying that the media. Hang on a second, John. Let me finish. You are saying wait a second. Now, John, we will end it if you don't let me speak. If you don't let me speak, we'll end it. You are suggesting that the Telegraph, that the rest of the media, me, us, this programme, this station, is being led by a Downing Street operation to control the news so that the statistic you've just said, which has been broadcast in our news bulletins, which we'll come on to later in the programme, is to be hidden by the fact that this story is out there. Is that the suggestion?
No, it's not. What I'd like to say is simply this, is that in the 21st century, I don't care about the professor's love life.
Neither
Obviously, do I. But hold on. That is the way it's been coloured. Now, this man, to me, is a hero because he's the man who persuaded Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings and the government to bring the lockdown. And lots of people were getting more and more worried, including me, including many, many people in Britain, saying we should do lockdown. And all the evidence shows that the successful countries like Germany and South Korea, the people who locked down early were the people who have had less deaths and are able to come out of this mess earlier than we are. And right now, we are the worst government, or rather, we have the worst numbers of people, the highest number of dead for the whole of Europe. And a simple observation is it's because we put our lockdown in very late. Mm-hmm. And to this day, people coming in from China, from the States, from Italy, from Spain, can fly into Heathrow and nothing happens to them. It feels crazy to me. Anyway,
John, this is a question. Actually, you raise a very important issue that we will be coming on to later in the programme as well, about the issue on borders and what Patrick Vallance has said. But come back to this issue, which is fundamental, which is trust. Trust in what the government is telling us, trust in what the scientists are telling us, trust in the science that is apparently leading the government's decision-making. Is it not of some importance that one of the people who is absolutely at the heart of that science, as you describe him as a hero, some people would look at the science that he is putting forward. That's fine. That happens in scientific debate anyway. Whatever you think of him, is it not important that one of the people who is helping to lead this effort has broken the advice that he gave him to the rest of the country?
So, the deputy scientific advisor in Scotland, Catherine Calderwood, I understand she was critical of what Boris Johnson's government was doing, and she was outed too. I think it might be possible that sorry, Tom, give me a second to explain myself. I think it's possible that if you were to put the powers of surveillance that the Daily Telegraph had, and let's remember it's owned by the Barkey twins, billionaire recluses who don't pay tax or proper big-time tax in Britain, but this newspaper has managed to expose this professor on the day that the news comes out that Britain has now got the worst number of deaths in Europe.
Well,
so,
John, I'm going to have to park that.
No, okay.
Go on,
is it
ask the
possible,
question.
Is it possible that there are other people in government who have also broken the lockdown rules, but they're not being exposed and shamed in this way? That's why I think it's a witch hunt.
There were questions about Robert Jenrick, of course, but let's come back to the actual point, which is
he's a government minister.
Catherine Calderwood resigned because she went to her second home twice, breaking her own advice. Did she not, or is that a lie? Professor Ferguson has resigned tonight because he has broken the advice that he's been telling the public about not mixing with other households and having to stay socially distanced from people. Did he not, or is that a lie and a setup? Clearly, it isn't.
I think you've answered your own question. But the problem here is this, is that you can, if you leak a little bit of the truth, then it appears to be damning. However, is it possible there are other people in government, other scientific advisors or cabinet ministers or even the Prime Minister who have actually broken the lockdown rules?
Well, I look forward to the journalism that exposes that too. I don't think there is any.
No, but so the worry is this: is that it's possible that Professor Ferguson was causing this government trouble, and therefore, bang, he's gone.
But John, hang on. You create the conspiracy. You create the possibility of the conspiracy behind it. But you created this possibility. My question is very straightforward. Hang on a sec. My question is very straightforward. Did this man break his own rules?
He broke. Yes, he did, and I'm sorry for that. But I don't think he's alone in that. I think, there are 20 members of the cabinet, maybe more. I think if they had been put under the same microscope, then I'd be worried about this. The public health evidence is simple. Across the world, those countries who have locked down fastest have saved most lives. Britain has the worst. Well, actually, that's a question, isn't it? Because if you go to Denmark, my Danish friends would say, well, actually, we have far fewer deaths than they have in Sweden. But there's you can go.
But they haven't locked down. They've socially distanced and they've managed to contain the spread.
But also the smart countries, in particular, I'm leading with South Korea and Germany. Correct me if I'm wrong. Have done something else as well. They've done testing and tracing all at the same time. Yeah. And that's a smart thing to have done. And they started it early, and they bought the right kind of kit early, or they had it in stockpiles.
John, we talk regularly about testing and tracking. I don't know if you know about the app, but you might have heard it on this programme. But just on this final point, on the news about Professor Ferguson, do you therefore think he is right to have resigned?
As I said in my panic diary on Twitter, I think this is a witch hunt. I think this professor is clearly, because he's the lead professor of the lead program, the smartest guy on biological mathematical modelling in the United Kingdom. And I think it's a terrible loss for our fight against the virus that he's been knocked out because essentially of an error of judgment, which looks terrible in a newspaper. But I'm uneasy about how this sits. I don't think he's alone, and I think that what we're ending up doing is persecuting people who are causing the government difficulties.
Well,
now,
I think, John, look, I think there is. Hang on a sec, no, because we're going to run out of time. I think on the point about have other people broken social distancing rules, undoubtedly that's why people are being fined for it. I suspect there are people who haven't been caught whilst breaking the social distancing rules.
Okay, yes,
the difference is the majority of those people are not people who have been taking to the airwaves day in, day out, and rightly, as a scientist, telling people what the best thing to do for them and their safety is, and then ignoring.
Sorry, you're missing my point. I'm not talking about, bus drivers and bakers and candlestick makers. I'm talking about the likes of people like Dominic Cummings and other people in the cabinet or political advisors in the cabinet who were not under the scrutiny.
Being exposed.
Sorry?
I look forward to that being exposed if it is indeed true.
Yes, but the problem
until it's proven to be true, we have to withhold judgment.
Sorry, that doesn't cut the mustard here. What's happened is the brightest and best mathematical biological modeller in the United Kingdom has been taken out over some sexual indignity and an error of judgment. And I don't commend him for his error of judgment. Obviously, he did something wrong. However, I do not think the interests of public health are served by this man being fired or having to resign today, and I'm uneasy about the processes, the secret processes behind it. I read, it may be wrong, but I read on Twitter that this stuff, some of these dates happened like a couple of weeks ago. Why bring it out today? Why bring it out today on the day that Britain is revealed to have the worst death rate numbers for the virus in Europe? What's the answer to that question, Tom? Sorry, what's the answer to that question?
I don't know why they brought it out today. I've got no idea. I don't work at the Telegraph. But I think if you're waiting for an answer to that question, it's better not to prejudge the answer by saying it's Dominic Cummings, right? Or wrong?
Sorry, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. You're saying that. What I'm asking you is, I'm uneasy about this. I think it's a kind of witch burning. I think this professor is a clever and good man, and I'm worried for our public health that he's gone, and I'm uneasy about how it happened.
I think that it is a very fair point to be worried about whether his skills are going to be missed around the table because he's had to resign from it. John, we have to leave it there for time reasons. Thank you. John Sweeney, writer, broadcaster, investigative journalist, who is also available on Twitter.